Hello and welcome to the first ever gardening channel on YouTube. I can't believe no one else has had this idea before. This is actually the first video I've ever shot, edited, and uploaded, and while I definitely prefer the digging, building, and growing aspect of this project to the sitting and staring at a screen part, in recent years I've felt a desire to kind of start chronicling my family's ongoing backyard vegetable gardening project. If nothing else, I'll have this channel as a sort of video garden journal to which I can refer in seasons to come, kind of a way to look back at what worked and what didn't in order to modify methods moving forward. In the interest of being honest from the start, I'll admit that I'm far from an expert on agriculture. I hold no relevant degrees, I've never taken a master gardener class, and I mostly butcher the Latin names of plants. Still, we did convert a small, semi-urban backyard into a system of raised bed gardens that yielded hundreds of pounds of fresh vegetables last year. To me, that's kind of exciting, and being in my 40s, I don't really get excited about things anymore. Anyway, the first few seasons were a bit rough. During the first 2 to 3 seasons, I failed to employ appropriate countermeasures against the veggie garden's single greatest foe in California's Sacramento Valley: long, extremely hot, extremely dry summers. Our summers are nothing short of brutal, and for someone like me who lived the first 30 some odd years of his life in northern New England, they're nothing short of hellish. For example, in 2022, the Sacramento area endured a total of 42 days of temps that were 100 degrees or greater. We had a particularly fun 9-day stretch in September where every day was over 100. Most days were over 105, and 2 of those days hit 114. Making matters worse, we received no appreciable rainfall from April to November. I quickly found that sticking to gardening methods practical in more moderate climates meant a Sacramento garden would shrivel up and possibly burst into flames before the end of June. Adding insult to injury is the fact that our winters, while not the deep freezes I experienced in the Vermont of my youth, are still pretty damn chilly. Warmish winter days with frosty nights are very common here. This can make cool weather loving but frost intolerant crops like potatoes very hard to grow. I find this particularly frustrating, as few things are as satisfying on a chilly winter's day than an oven full of crispy roast potatoes. Through an ongoing cycle of failure, research, and modification of methods, we have so far been able to work around some of the climatic challenges inherent to the region, resulting in our garden really starting to take off in recent years. My overarching goal for the project is to shift our gardens from the realm of backyard hobby to something more akin to a microfarm. I'm not sure if that's a term, but if not, it should be. I want to increase yields of our small space to the maximum possible without employing synthetic fertilizers, pesticides, and herbicides. We probably can't technically call our gardens organic, but I'm not going to be flooding our beds with Miracle-Gro anytime soon. I'm very curious to find out what percentage of our family's overall food needs can be met with only 400 square feet of growing space, and that's kind of about what I'm working with at the moment. I also want to explore gardening methods that conserve as much water as possible. You might not have heard, but in recent years, California has been going through a little bit of a dry spell. I want to make sure my gardens ultimately require less water in the summer than the average lawn. Finally, I want to do all of this for as cheaply as is reasonably possible. While there are a lot of psychological and culinary benefits to growing your own vegetables, my practical side needs a reasonable ROI on the project. I love fresh heirloom tomatoes, but I'd rather them not ultimately cost me $50 a piece. Now that I'm done with my little preamble, let's take a look at what I've got going right now, late March 2023. All right, first up is just my inexpensive little grow light setup here. It's actually right now more of a cat lounging spot. We've got our cat Dargo here enjoying the warmth of the grow lights. One little tray of peppers still there that isn't quite ready to start hardening off in the sun like everything else is at the moment. This grow light setup is definitely inexpensive. It leaves some stuff to be desired, but it's good enough for starting seeds. The grow light setup was kind of a game changer for us in helping stop seedlings from damping off. All right, heading outside. These are largely these are all tomato and pepper starts that we have going. I've just been able to start bringing them out to get some real sunlight and get them ready to go on the ground in a couple of weeks here. I'm very aware of the irony that right now Our garden is kind of a disheveled, soggy mess from an unending series, seemingly, of atmospheric river storms that came through this winter. I know the irony that this is a channel all about drought-proof gardening, and we've had nothing but rain since December. But here's the overgrown, neglected carrots, some mustard greens that have gone to flower, and some peas that just never really took off this season. All right, so all I'm really going to do here is just kind of walk the perimeter and everything in between, kind of show what I've got going on. Mostly, these beds are shut down. I'm trying to terminate cover crop in some of them with just putting some cardboard on top to block the light. I've got some mint growing. This giant bed here, I would never usually make one this big, 6x6. It's not pleasant or fun to reach into, but mostly what I grow in here is vining squashes and pumpkins. So it's kind of set it and forget it. I plant the starts. There's going to be kind of a cage of trellising going on around it. And as long as I keep them watered, they're going to kind of do their own thing. All right, lots of stuff that I left here to trip over. More beds. Again, more cover crop currently being terminated. None of what I build is pretty. I'm some days a little self-conscious about that. But the way I've started to look at it is that at the end of the day, these are all wooden boxes that hold damp dirt. No matter how pretty you make them, they're going to rot. So why spend the extra time and money on pretty trim? And also, when they're full of tomato plants and peppers and beans and cucumbers, nobody tends to really notice, how good of a craftsman you are when it comes to woodworking. All right, so compost bin, I've mostly emptied that out of all the finished compost that I'm going to be using to feed and fertilize plants as I put them in the ground. All right, so these two beds here, and I actually have a single upcoming video on turning clay soil into usable, growable soil. I installed these a couple of weeks ago, and so far I haven't bought anything to, any soil to have to put in them or top them off with. I'm going to, because all of the organic matter that I mixed in with the clay, our natural soil is pretty much 100% clay. To make that into growable soil, you mix in compost, organic matter, it breaks down, turns into loam, and loam is good. The problem is that as all that organic matter broke down, the level of the beds really dropped. So I'm probably going to have to buy just some inexpensive bales of Home Depot topsoil or something to kind of top that off a little bit. In grow bags here, I have some potatoes. Potatoes are a huge challenge for me. I love growing them when they work out, but potatoes, unfortunately, they're killed by extreme heat and they're killed by frost. So extreme heat in the summer plus frost in the winter, you have a very, very narrow growing season to kind of try to get them in. Most of the time, they end up being small little boiler-sized potatoes. And if you're wondering about the branches and twigs that I have draped over the top, we have a bugger of a stray cat that essentially sees these as toilets lined up. Before I got the potatoes in, came out when I started working, found that it had pooped in pretty much every last one of these. So far, just making that a little less attractive to poop in, that seems to be working out there. Some more potatoes in grow bags. A lot of people love grow bags, and I think they're great in the winter here. It's a pain to keep them from drying out every 12 seconds during the hot summers. All right, and finally, let's say hi to the chickens. I initially didn't want to get into, I don't want to focus there. There they come. They think they're going to get dried bugs. They will in a second. I initially didn't really want to get into doing the chicken thing, but one of these guys picked us. Actually, he just or she obviously just showed up in our yard one day and wouldn't leave. So we said, why not? Got 2 more, and really glad we did, given that the cost of eggs decided to absolutely skyrocket. And now we're getting about 12.5 eggs a week out of these guys. So that's really, really been helpful. Super easy to keep. They're happy and healthy. Dried bugs, kitchen scraps, plenty of scratch, and they live the good life. All right, so that's kind of where we're at right now. I'm going to kind of also just chronicle the setup and turning this yard garden area into less of a mess for the upcoming season. And we will go from there. Thanks for watching to the almost nobody who's going to watch this first video.